A billionaire, broken by betrayal, stages his own downfall, disguising himself as a homeless, crippled beggar, all to ask one burning question: would she still love me if I had nothing? What he discovers will shatter illusions, expose true hearts, and change lives forever. Sit back and watch as masks fall, love is tested, and a stranger's kindness becomes the richest gift of all. This is the story of a billionaire who disguised himself as a homeless, crippled beggar just to propose to his fiancée. And trust me, you've never seen love tested like this. Daniel Obasi had everything most people could only dream of: wealth, power, and a name that opened doors. At just 32, he owned real estate across Lagos, luxury cars that sparkled under the sun, and a company that ran itself with a team of the best minds in Nigeria. But despite the riches and applause, Daniel felt empty. Every morning he woke up in a massive mansion where silence echoed louder than music. His phone buzzed with business alerts and congratulatory messages, yet not one message ever asked, "How are you, really?" His fiancée Sasha was the envy of many, beautiful, stylish, and always trending on social media. They had been together for a year after meeting at a charity ball through mutual friends. Everyone said they were the perfect couple, but Daniel wasn't sure anymore. He had started noticing little things. Sasha loved the attention that came with his name. She would post pictures of gifts he bought her and tag luxury brands in every post. Whenever they talked about the future, she focused on the wedding decor, the location, the press coverage, but never about building a home or starting a life together. One evening, Daniel walked into the house earlier than expected. As he approached the living room, he heard laughter and clinking glasses. Sasha was with her two closest friends. He stood still in the hallway, out of sight, and listened. "Babe, you've hit the jackpot," one of the girls said, laughing. Sasha laughed. "Now you're talking? I told you I secured the bag a long time ago." "Even if he goes broke," the other friend added, "you'll still take half." Sasha replied with a smirk, "That's plan B." Daniel froze. His heart didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly like thin glass under pressure. He wanted to walk in and say something, but he didn't. He stood there, hoping what he heard wasn't what they truly meant. Later that night, when Sasha came into their bedroom acting sweet and caring, Daniel tried to pretend nothing happened. "It's just girls joking," he told himself. "They were just playing around." But the thought refused to leave. Then one evening his old friend Desmond came to visit. They talked, laughed, poured drinks, and as the night grew deeper, Desmond shared a story, one that would change everything. "Bro, let me tell you," Desmond began, shaking his head. "My cousin lost everything in one business deal. His fiancée, that girl he worshipped, she left him, not even 1 month, said she couldn't live in poverty. She had another man all along, richer, crueler, she didn't care." Daniel sat quietly, staring into his glass. The story sank into him like a stone. That night he couldn't sleep. What if Sasha was only staying for the comfort? What if love wasn't really in the picture, just security? He needed to know. Daniel decided he was going to find out the truth, even if it meant pretending to lose everything. The air in his study felt heavier than usual. The ceiling fan turned slowly above him, pushing the warm Lagos air in slow circles. He sat in silence, still thinking about Desmond's story. His eyes were fixed on the glass of water on the table, but his mind was somewhere else. Replaying Sasha's laughter from that night, her friends' voices echoing like shadows in his head. "I secured the bag. That's plan B. Now." The words were no longer harmless jokes. They felt like signs, warnings. Daniel had been hurt before, more than once. In university, his first serious girlfriend had left him the moment he lost a scholarship and told her his father no longer supported him. Years later, a woman he dated while building his company had ghosted him when his startup struggled to break even. Each time he thought he'd found someone real, he ended up alone. This time with Sasha, he had truly hoped it would be different. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. "Maybe I'm overthinking things," he muttered. Just then, laughter drifted in from the balcony. He stood up quietly and moved closer to the open door. Sasha was out there with Janet, her best friend, a popular lifestyle influencer known for her bold opinions and thousands of online followers. Janet's voice rang loud and clear. "Babe, I swear, even if Daniel loses everything, you've locked him in already. That ring, that wedding, you're set for life." Sasha laughed. "Of course, once we marry, I'll control everything." They clinked their wine glasses together. Daniel didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stood there. It wasn't just a joke this time. It was her truth. He felt it. The pain was sharp, familiar, and this time he didn't push it aside. He stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, heart beating faster. Every memory of Sasha's expensive tastes, the way she dismissed his quiet moments, the way she always needed to be seen, it all started to make sense now. Back in his study, he sat down slowly and ran his hands over his face. The decision was already forming in his mind, but now it had a solid foundation. This wasn't just fear anymore. It was proof. That night, he visited his mother. Mrs. Obasi was a graceful woman, full of wisdom and warmth. She had seen Daniel through every season of his life. They sat in her garden under the evening sky. He told her everything, about Sasha, the things he'd overheard, Desmond's story, and the idea he couldn't shake. "I need to know, Mom," Daniel said quietly. "Before I build a future with her, I need to know if she's here for me or for what I have." Mrs. Obasi looked at him for a long time. Her voice was calm but firm. "Then test her character, my son, but be careful. Love and truth are both delicate things. You must be ready for what you find." Daniel nodded. That night, alone in his room, he stared at the engagement photo of him and Sasha on the wall. They looked perfect. Matching white outfits, flawless smile. But what was behind that smile? He had made his decision. He was going to fake everything, his fall, his losses, even his pain, until the truth came to light. It began with a carefully written press release. Daniel's communications team, sworn to secrecy, put out a statement that shook the business world. According to reports, a major international deal Daniel had invested in had collapsed overnight. Millions were lost. Investors were pulling out. His name was suddenly attached to the words no billionaire wanted to hear. Bankruptcy, scandal, liquidation. He made sure Sasha saw it first on the news. That evening, he sat across from her in their living room, the large flat screen muted behind them, replaying his own downfall on every major network. He looked tired, defeated, just enough to seem real. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I trusted the wrong people. The company's value dropped by over 80%. I've taken a huge loan just to stay afloat. The cars, the house, everything is at risk." Sasha stared at him, lips slightly parted, her glass of wine trembling in her hand. "You mean we could lose everything?" she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly, watching her face carefully. She leaned forward and took his hand. Her voice softened. "I don't care about any of that. I'll stand by you, Daniel. Money comes and goes. What matters is that you're still here." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He wanted to believe her. She sounded sincere. Her touch was gentle. For a brief moment, he wondered if he had misjudged her. "Thank you," he said, almost believing her. "You don't know how much that means to me." Sasha smiled and kissed his forehead. But later that night, when Daniel stepped out to take a call, Sasha picked up her phone too. She hesitated for only a second before dialing a number she hadn't used in months. "Toba," she said quietly when the call connected. "Hey. Yeah, it's been a while. Can we meet?" The next day she told Daniel she needed space to clear her head. She said she was going to stay at her cousin's place for a few days. Daniel didn't argue. He told her goodbye and wished her well. But the driver he assigned to her, one she never noticed, followed discreetly. By evening, Daniel had pictures. Sasha, dressed in a fitted black dress, was laughing across a cafe table with a tall, fashionable man, Toba, a rising influencer and former flame. They looked comfortable, familiar. Too familiar. Daniel studied the photos without flinching. He had been wrong to believe her. The soft words, The promise to stand by him. They were part of the act, nothing more. Back in his study, he removed the engagement photo from the wall. He placed it face down in a drawer and locked it. The test had just begun. And now he was more determined than ever to finish it. 3 days passed. Daniel stayed quiet, watching. He received no messages from Sasha, no calls, no signs of worry. But then, on the evening of the 3rd day, the front door opened, and Sasha walked in. Her makeup was flawless. She wore her favorite red heels, the ones Daniel had bought her in Paris. She held a small bag in one hand and a confident smile on her face. "I'm back," she said, setting the bag down. "I've decided to stay. I want to help you through this tough time." Daniel looked up from the armchair in the study, surprised by how casually she said it. He nodded. "Thank you." He didn't argue. He didn't question. Just thanked her. That night, as they ate a quiet dinner, Daniel told her he had arranged a private meeting with a potential investor. "If this works out," he said, "we might be able to save everything." Sasha perked up instantly. "Really? That's good news, Daniel. Just do your best." "I will," he said, smiling faintly. The next morning, Daniel left the house, but not for any meeting. Instead, he went to a remote private facility where everything had been arranged in advance. The car accident was staged along an empty stretch of road outside town. The wreck was made to look real. The emergency responders, already briefed, played their part perfectly. His doctor, loyal to the family, confirmed what the headlines would soon report. Daniel Obasi, billionaire entrepreneur, had been paralyzed from the waist down. When the news reached Sasha, she put on a dramatic show. Tears, prayers, worried pacing. She even took a photo of herself beside his empty hospital bed and posted it online with the caption, "God, please heal him. #faith strong, #love hurts." But when no cameras were watching, she said nothing. No questions, no real grief. She visited him once, stayed for 10 minutes, and left without even asking when he'd be discharged. A few days later, she returned home to find a note resting on the marble counter in the hallway. It was handwritten in Daniel's clean, simple script. "I need time to heal. Financially and emotionally, don't look for me. No forwarding address, no phone call, nothing else." Sasha stared at the note for a moment, then slowly sat on the couch. After a long silence, she smiled to herself. Finally. She folded the note neatly and dropped it into her handbag. That evening, agents from the bank came to seize the house. The loan Daniel had taken had defaulted. The mansion, the cars, the staff, all gone in hours. Sasha packed her things in silence. By nightfall, she was dragging her box suitcase down the driveway in her heels, muttering under her breath, "After everything, now look at me, moving back to that cramped house. Daniel, may suffering never leave you for doing this to me." She didn't call. She was just glad to be free. Weeks had passed since Daniel vanished from Sasha's world. The news had moved on. The mansion was gone. The Obasi name no longer trended online. Sasha had returned to her old apartment and resumed her social life with as much grace as she could fake. She told people Daniel had become too emotionally unstable. "He needed space," she'd say with a shrug. "I let him go." She was walking beside Janet, her best friend, one sunny afternoon when it happened. They were heading into a small supermarket in the heart of Surulere. Sasha wore a light designer scarf and dark glasses. Janet had her phone in hand, scrolling through her latest Instagram engagement. Then Sasha saw him. A man sat in a rusty wheelchair just outside the supermarket entrance. His clothes were stained and torn. His face was unshaven. Dust covered his skin and hair. Most people walked past without a glance. She didn't recognize him at first. But then he wheeled forward, slowly. One hand reached into a plastic bag on his lap and pulled out a single plastic flower. "Sasha." His voice was soft, broken. "Please." She froze. That voice, that face, her stomach twisted. "Daniel," she whispered. Daniel looked up at her, eyes full of quiet pain. I know I have nothing, but I still love you. Will you marry me?" He stretched out the plastic flower with a trembling hand. Sasha stepped back in shock, her lips curled in disgust. What is this? What are you doing here?" People nearby began to turn and stare. "I thought you said you'd stand by me," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "You promised." Janet, now fully aware of the scene, stepped between them and scoffed. "How dare this trash even approach us? This is disgusting!" Daniel turned to Sasha again, still holding out the flower. "I just wanted to remind you. I loved you. I thought you would still see me." Sasha's expression hardened. Anger took over her face. She slapped the flower out of his hand. Then she slapped him hard across the cheek. "How dare you!" she yelled. "You're not even standing on your own 2 feet. You dare to talk to me. You dare to embarrass me like this." Daniel's head hung low. "You stink," she added, stepping back. "Get away from me. I will have you arrested for harassment." People around began to murmur. Some laughed, some recorded. Daniel tried to speak, but Sasha wasn't done. "Whatever we had is over," she snapped. "Do you hear me? Over. I cancelled that wedding long ago and I've moved on, with a man who's not stuck in a wheelchair begging on the street." Janet laughed beside her, arms crossed. "Honestly, Sasha, this is just sad. Look at him." Daniel sat in silence, the flower now on the ground. He had planned this moment, hoping to touch her heart, hoping something, anything human in her would respond. But the cruelty he saw in her eyes was colder than anything he imagined. He didn't speak again. He couldn't. He didn't know why he reached out. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe deep down he still wanted to believe that somewhere inside Sasha, a sliver of care remained. But as he gently moved his hand toward her, just to ask, just to speak, Sasha turned on him with fury in her eyes. She slapped his hand away, hard. "Get your filthy hands off me," she screamed. "Don't ever touch me again." More people had gathered now, some with phones, some whispering, some laughing. Sasha didn't stop. "You're disgusting," she hissed. "You don't even belong on the same street as me. You think because I once dated you, you can beg for my love again? Never." Janet, still holding her phone as if she might live stream the whole thing, added loudly, "Trash will always be trash." That was when the door of the supermarket swung open. A young woman in a neat supermarket uniform rushed out, eyes wide with disbelief and anger. She was petite, soft-spoken, but her steps were bold and full of fire. "Hey!" she called out, walking straight towards Sasha and Janet. "What do you think you're doing?" Both women turned, surprised. "You've humiliated a man who only showed you love," she said, standing protectively in front of the beggar. "Even if you didn't want him, you didn't have to treat him like garbage." Sasha rolled her eyes. "Excuse me." "You heard me," the woman snapped. "He may not have money, he may be in a wheelchair, but he's still human." Janet let out a sarcastic laugh. "And who are you? His savior?" "I'm someone who still has a heart," she replied, "which is more than I can say for either of you." She turned to the man in the wheelchair, her expression softening immediately. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," she said gently. "Please don't let them make you feel less than who you are." Daniel looked up at her. Her voice was calm but filled with warmth. No cameras, no audience, no performance. Just kindness. "It's not what you have that defines you," she added. "It's who you are." Daniel's throat tightened. For a brief second, he thought about revealing everything right there. That it was all a test. That he wasn't crippled. That he was Daniel Obasi, the billionaire who had been publicly torn apart. But something stopped him. This stranger had no idea who he was, and yet she stood by him. He wanted to see what she'd do next, how far her kindness would go without fame or fortune behind it. He cleared his throat. "Thank you," he whispered. She smiled. "I'm Evelyn. I work inside. Would you like some water?" He nodded slowly. "Yes." "Thank you, Evelyn." Behind them, Sasha laughed loudly. "Oh, please, what is this? A charity drama?" she said as she walked off. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Janet linked arms with her and added, "Thank God this happened before the wedding. Imagine being stuck with that." They both laughed cruelly as they disappeared down the street, heels clicking against the pavement. Daniel didn't look at them. He looked at Evelyn. And for the first time in weeks, he felt seen. As Sasha and Janet disappeared from view, their laughter still ringing in the distance, Daniel lowered his head and let out a slow breath. He closed his eyes for a moment. It was truly and finally over. No more hoping, no more testing, no more pretending that somewhere inside Sasha, there was love left to salvage. Her words had cut deeper than any blade, but her actions had confirmed what his heart had been warning him all along. She was never meant for him. Beside him, Evelyn knelt gently and touched his arm. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Daniel looked at her. Even in his worn disguise, dirt-streaked, tattered clothes, and unwashed face, her eyes met his without hesitation. "I'll be fine," he replied. His voice was tired, hollow. She glanced around, noticing how uncomfortable he looked, and how people were still stealing glances his way. "Where do you live?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "Nowhere. Not anymore." Evelyn stood up slowly. "Come with me," she said. Daniel blinked. "Where?" "My house," she answered simply. "You can't sleep outside." He tried to argue, but she had already turned to head inside the supermarket and told her supervisor she was leaving early. Minutes later, she emerged again with a small bag of groceries and a bottle of water, which she handed to Daniel before helping guide his wheelchair down the road. They walked quietly through the busy neighborhood. After a short walk and a bumpy ride over uneven streets, they reached a narrow compound with faded walls and rusted gates. Evelyn led him into a small one-room apartment, the paint peeling, the ceiling fan barely turning, but clean and homely. "Mom," she called. "I brought someone. He needed help." From the corner of the room, an older woman with gentle eyes and a wrapper tied around her waist stepped out. Evelyn explained everything quickly. Her mother looked Daniel over with a concerned but kind expression. "You can stay," her mother said. "We don't have much, but we can't let someone suffer in the street." She laid out a clean wrapper on a low mattress and brought Daniel a small bowl of water to wash his hands and face. Evelyn handed him a folded t-shirt, one of her late father's old shirts, and a pair of soft cotton trousers. Daniel sat silently as they bustled around him. Later, they shared a simple meal, rice and stew served from a single pot. Evelyn gave Daniel the bigger portion without hesitation. He watched her laugh with her mother, talk softly, and clean up without complaining. Daniel had lived in the biggest houses in the city. He had dined with governors, walked red carpets, and slept on imported sheets. But in this tiny room, with a flickering bulb, 2 plastic chairs, and a cracked window, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. He didn't say who he really was. He didn't talk about Sasha. He just sat, quietly soaking in the warmth of strangers who gave without asking, who cared without judging. The days passed slowly, but peacefully. Each morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of Evelyn humming as she swept the small room. Her mother would rise just after dawn, boiling water over a tiny kerosene stove, preparing pap and beans for breakfast. The room was small, no privacy, no luxury, but it was full of warmth. Daniel stayed mostly quiet. He didn't want to lie, but he couldn't tell the truth either. So he said little, just, "Thank you, I'm fine, and good morning." He spent his days sitting by the window in his wheelchair, watching the neighborhood come alive, children running, traders shouting, the rhythm of life moving with or without him. But what caught his attention most was Evelyn. She never had much. Her salary as a supermarket attendant barely covered their food and rent, yet she found joy in the smallest things, laughing with her mother, singing while cooking, and telling Daniel funny stories to make him smile. Every afternoon she packed a small lunch, usually gari and ground nuts or leftover rice, and walked to work. Daniel noticed something one afternoon. Instead of eating, She handed her food to two little children who always sat under a mango tree near the shop. They beamed up at her like she was their hero. Another evening, Daniel overheard Evelyn whispering to a neighbor, asking if she could help her mother get her next batch of blood pressure medication on credit. Her mother had been managing a long-term illness, but Evelyn never made it anyone else's burden. She smiled through it all. Daniel felt something shift inside him. This was the kind of woman he had dreamed of. Not perfect, not polished, not rich, but real. She never asked him about his past. She never complained about his silence or the fact that he barely moved or helped around the house. She simply treated him with quiet dignity. She served him food with both hands. She made sure his bathwater was warm. She asked if he needed anything before going to work, and greeted him with a tired but genuine smile every evening. One night, as rain tapped gently on the roof, Evelyn sat beside him, drying her wet feet with a towel. "Are you doing okay?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "I am. Thank you for everything." Evelyn looked at him for a moment, then smiled. "You're welcome. Everyone deserves a little kindness." She didn't know it, but those words stayed with Daniel long after the lights were out and everyone had fallen asleep. In a world that once measured everything by money and status, Daniel had finally found something priceless. A heart that didn't need to be impressed, only understood. The rain hadn't stopped since morning. Outside, the streets were soaked, the sky a dull gray. Inside the small one-room apartment, the soft tapping of droplets on the roof mixed with the gentle rustling of Evelyn flipping through an old magazine. Daniel sat by the window, hands resting in his lap, staring out at nothing in particular. "Tell me something about you," Evelyn said suddenly, breaking the silence. Daniel turned his head slowly. "What do you want to know?" "Anything," she said with a small smile. "Something real. Something that makes you, you." He hesitated. "I used to live a different life," he said carefully. "A big life. But I lost it. I lost everything." Evelyn didn't ask how. She didn't press for details. Instead, she nodded and said, "Sometimes the best parts of us come after we lose everything." He looked at her, curious. "And you? What's your story?" She sighed, then spoke, her voice steady but soft. "I wanted to be a nurse," she said. "I got admission. I was so happy. My father had started saving, but he died before I could finish year 1. Everything fell apart. I had to drop out and start working to take care of Mama." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. "That must have been hard," Evelyn shrugged. "It was. But we're still here, and I'm still breathing. Some people didn't even get that far." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Then she added gently, "What you lost doesn't define you, Daniel. What you do now does." Daniel's chest tightened at her words. She had no idea who he really was. She had no clue that the man sitting in her living room, the man she was feeding, comforting and defending, was once the billionaire every magazine wrote about. And yet, she spoke to him like a friend, not a project. Like a human, not a charity case. He turned to look at her again, his heart heavier than it had been in weeks, but not with pain, with something else. Something warmer, something dangerous. Love. Real love. Not the kind wrapped in flashy gifts or filtered selfies. This was different. This was quiet, gentle, steady. It came not from admiration or envy, but from understanding. And that terrified him. Because while he was sure of how he felt, he wasn't sure what Evelyn felt. It was one thing to pity a crippled, homeless man, another thing entirely to love him. Could someone like her love someone like this? He looked down at his hands. He had shown his fiancée everything once, and it didn't give him what Evelyn gave him now. But if he told her the truth, would he lose her too? Daniel didn't know yet. So he stayed quiet and just listened to the sound of her breathing beside him. While Daniel sat in a quiet home filled with warmth and silent questions, The world outside had started to spin in a very different direction. Far away, in a more upscale part of the town, Sasha scrolled through her phone, her fingers shaking. There it was. A video clip, grainy but clear enough. She was in front of the supermarket, dressed in her finest outfit, yelling at a man in a wheelchair. Her voice echoed through the footage. "Get your filthy hands off me! You stink! You think I would ever marry a crippled beggar?" There was no editing, no manipulation. The footage had come straight from the supermarket security camera, most likely leaked by an employee who had seen the whole thing unfold. In less than an hour, the video was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, blogs, WhatsApp groups. People reacted with disgust and anger. "This is evil." She used to post love quotes. Now look. Imagine treating a disabled person like that. Although no one recognized the beggar as Daniel Obasi due to his disheveled appearance and the unclear CCTV footage. By the next morning, the hashtags were trending. #cancel Sasha, #plastic heart, #disability is not disgrace. Her social media following, once her pride, began to shrink like melting ice. Brands she had partnered with pulled out one after another. Clothing companies deleted her pictures. Skincare brands took down her paid promotions. A luxury shoe brand even issued a public statement. "We do not support cruelty or ableism. We have cut all ties with Sasha." She tried to fight back. She went on a live stream with tears in her eyes. "I was set up," she cried. "I was scared. You don't know the full story. I've been through so much." Some people showed sympathy. Most didn't. Janet, her influencer friend, stayed silent at first. But when the pressure grew, she posted a video saying, "I was just there. I didn't say anything. I don't support what Sasha did." Sasha felt betrayed. But she still had one person, Toba, her current boyfriend, the man she had run to when Daniel lost it all. She now lived with Toba in a flashy apartment that wasn't hers. She wore his shirts and smiled for pictures, trying to seem unbothered. But behind the filters and fake laughs was panic. She scrolled through hate comments each night, her smile growing thinner. "It'll pass," she told herself. "These people forget easily. Another scandal will trend. Someone will cheat. A celebrity will fight. They'll move on." And with that, she shut off her phone and pulled the blanket over her head. She didn't regret what she'd done. She only regretted getting caught. Meanwhile, Daniel sat by the window, deep in thought, watching Evelyn and her mother fold laundry together. He had been quiet for days, quieter than usual. Not because he was unsure, but because he knew what he had to do next. That evening, when Evelyn left for work and her mother slept off in the small room, Daniel picked up an old phone he had hidden inside his backpack, the only item he had brought from his old life. He powered it on and called a number he knew by heart. His mother answered on the second ring. "Daniel?" she said quickly, her voice full of both fear and relief. "It's me, Mom," he said softly. "I'm fine." He told her everything, every detail of the plan, the disguise, the heartbreak, and then the unexpected twist. Evelyn. Mrs. Obasi was silent for a while. "You've gone too far this time," she finally said, voice trembling. "But I understand why. And I'm proud of you, my son, for looking deeper." A few days later, Mrs. Obasi walked into the supermarket where Evelyn worked, dressed in a simple Ankara gown. No security, no announcement. She stood in line like any other customer. When she got to the counter, she picked up a small bag of rice and a bottle of cooking oil. Evelyn greeted her with a smile. "Good afternoon, Ma. Did you find everything you need?" "Yes, dear," she said warmly. Then she patted her pockets. "Oh dear, I think I forgot my wallet at home." The line behind her began to shift uncomfortably. A few impatient customers started grumbling. One cashier from another counter rolled her eyes and muttered loudly, "Madam, please step aside if you can't pay." But Evelyn quickly reached into her back pocket. "It's okay, Ma," she said without hesitation. "I'll cover it for you." The woman looked at her with surprise. "You don't even know me." Evelyn smiled. "That doesn't matter. All I see is someone who needs help." She paid, packed the bag gently and handed it over. "God bless you, my child," the woman said. Evelyn simply nodded. "Amen, Ma." Later that evening,
Evelyn returned home to find her mother smiling. "There's something different about you today," her mother said, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Evelyn chuckled. Maybe it's just peace. She didn't know that the woman she had helped that afternoon was Daniel's mother. And she didn't know that the next day, a large food package would arrive at their doorstep. Bags of rice, cartons of oil, canned tomatoes, yam, tissue paper, and toiletries. No note. No sender name. Evelyn looked around, confused. Maybe God just sent an angel, her mother whispered. Later that week, a local pharmacist called. Evelyn's mother's prescription had been fully paid for, a bill that has been hanging for a long time. Evelyn broke down in tears. She had no idea who was behind the quiet generosity. But in her heart, she whispered a silent thank you. Daniel, watching from the corner of the room, said nothing. But deep inside he knew something for sure now. This woman's heart was pure. And he was falling harder than he ever thought possible. 2 days later, the sun was just beginning to set when Evelyn returned home that evening. She looked tired, her shoulders low, her steps heavy, but her face still wore that gentle expression Daniel had grown used to. As she reached the door, she paused. A small bundle of envelopes was tucked into the space between the wooden door and the rusted gate. Curious, she picked them up and flipped through them as she stepped inside. Her hands trembled when she saw what they were. The first was a thick envelope from the Nursing and Health Sciences Institute, the very school she had once dreamed of attending. She tore it open and gasped as her eyes scanned the letter. She had been accepted, and more than that, her tuition, fully paid. The second envelope held copies of receipts from a private pharmacy. She stood in the middle of the small room, completely still. Then, slowly, she sat down on the edge of the bed and wept. Her mother came rushing in, alarmed, but when she saw the papers in Evelyn's hands and the overwhelmed look on her daughter's face, she understood. Evelyn wasn't crying from sadness. She was crying because someone had given her hope again. Later that evening, as they ate dinner, Daniel watched her from across the room. She was quieter than usual, lost in thought, her eyes occasionally glancing at the documents that now rested neatly beside her on the table. "You okay?" Daniel asked softly. She nodded and smiled. "Yes, I think a secret angel is watching over us." Daniel chuckled. Maybe it's some rich man who saw you and fell in love from afar. Would you run off and marry him if he showed up at your door tomorrow?" Evelyn laughed for real this time, the sound light and warm. "No." "Why not?" Daniel teased, raising a brow. "Because I already have someone in my heart," she said without hesitation. Daniel blinked. "You do?" She nodded, her gaze soft and sincere. He looked down at his hands, still playing the part of the broken beggar. "Even if that someone is crippled, with nothing to offer you?" Evelyn's voice didn't shake. Love isn't about what someone can offer or not. Real love isn't measured by what you have. It's how you see each other when everything else is gone. Daniel sat still for a moment, her words sinking deep into his soul. Then for the first time, he looked at her, without hiding. "I've loved you too," he said quietly. "For a long time now." She looked at him, surprised, but then she smiled and her eyes shimmered. In that little room with cracked walls and a flickering bulb, they sat side by side, saying nothing more. Because sometimes the heart speaks loudest in silence. News travels fast, even in quiet places. Sasha had stayed off the radar for weeks, waiting for the scandal to die down. But then one afternoon, while scrolling through her messages, she saw something that made her heart jolt. "That beggar that approached you, I learned he's not homeless anymore. Someone said that he is now living with a supermarket girl in Surulere." Her fingers froze. Daniel, the man she had mocked and discarded, was staying with a salesgirl. It must be that over-subby that had defended him that day. Sasha saw red. The next day, Just before noon, Evelyn was arranging items on a lower shelf near the cleaning supplies when a loud voice cut through the store. "So this is where you hide?" Evelyn stood up, startled, and turned to see Sasha storming toward her, flawless makeup, bright nails, but fury burning in her eyes. "Excuse me?" Evelyn asked, confused. "You think you're smart, huh? You think you can steal a useless man and destroy my name?" "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," Sasha snapped. "You're the reason that video got out, right? You work here after all. You leaked it to embarrass me." Evelyn's brows drew together. "I didn't leak anything. I had nothing to do with that video." "Oh, please," Sasha scoffed. "You can keep Daniel, the beggar version anyway. I had him when he was worth something. Now that he's broke and crippled, you can enjoy what's left." The other workers froze, customers turning to listen. Evelyn remained calm, voice steady. "Money doesn't define a person. You don't throw someone away just because life knocks them down." Sasha laughed bitterly and looked her up and down. "That's cute, really. Poverty mentality at its peak." With that, she turned on her heels and stormed out,
heels clicking furiously against the tiles. Later that evening, Evelyn sat alone on the edge of her bed. The house was quiet. Her mother had gone to visit a neighbor, but Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. She truly had nothing to do with that video, yet she had been accused like a criminal. Sasha's words echoed in her mind. "Enjoy what's left of him." She sighed and rubbed her eyes, trying to push the bitterness away. That was when Daniel rolled out from the corner of the room, watching her closely. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She looked up quickly and forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. There's nothing to worry about." But Daniel could see the tiredness behind her eyes, the weight of carrying something she didn't deserve. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. He had delayed it long enough. The truth was coming, and it would change everything. The next day was warm and bright. It looked like any ordinary afternoon, but for Daniel Obasi, today was the day everything would change. He waited patiently outside the supermarket, seated in the old wheelchair that had become part of his disguise. Dressed in the same worn shirt Evelyn had first handed him, he looked down at the velvet box resting quietly in his palm. When Evelyn finally stepped out of the store during her lunch break, she saw him waiting. "Daniel?" she asked, surprised. He smiled gently. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. He slowly wheeled himself to a quiet corner near the alley, the very same spot where weeks ago she had defended him, lifted his heart off the ground, and taken him into her life with nothing but kindness. But this time things were different. As he reached the middle of the walkway, he turned to face her fully. "You changed my life, Evelyn," he began, voice steady but full of emotion. "You made me see that not everyone is the same. That love isn't dead. You made me believe again, in something real, strong, honest." A few people had stopped nearby, curious. They recognized the man in the wheelchair. Whispers filled the air. And then, Daniel slowly reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a ring box. He opened it. Evelyn's eyes widened. "Evelyn," he said, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear, "will you marry me? Not because I have anything to offer, not because I'm someone special, but because you made me feel human again. Because with you, I found a love built on kindness, not status, a love I never thought I'd find." Evelyn gasped, hands covering her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, yes, Daniel, I will." The crowd erupted into soft applause and gasps of joy, but they weren't prepared for what came next. Daniel took a breath and stood up, straight, tall, strong. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Evelyn stumbled backward in pure shock. "Daniel, your legs." He gently pulled off the fake bandages, the layered shirts, the worn-out blanket on his lap. Then he reached up and peeled away the scruffy fake beard. Now there was no mistaking him.
Daniel Obasi, the billionaire, the man from magazines, the man she had unknowingly cared for with no expectation of anything in return. People in the crowd began to murmur, some pointing in disbelief, others bringing out their phones to record the moment. Daniel raised his hands gently to address them. "I was never crippled," he said. "What I lost wasn't my ability to walk, it was my ability to trust. I didn't want a love built on status or money. I needed to know who would stay if I had nothing." He turned to Evelyn again. "And I found an unexpected treasure, a woman who gave me shelter without asking for my name, a woman who shared her food, her heart, and her peace, without knowing she was giving it to a man who had the world, but had lost his soul." Then, kneeling down fully on one knee, Daniel held the ring forward once more. "Will you marry me as Daniel Obasi, not for my wealth but for who I am?" Evelyn, eyes full of tears, dropped to her knees with him and nodded through her sobs. "Yes, Daniel, 1,000 times yes." The crowd clapped louder. Someone shouted, "This is real love!" And just like that, the crippled beggar became the man he truly was again. But this time, with someone beside him who had already seen the man beneath it all and chosen to love him anyway. Later that same day, after the crowd had faded and the cameras stopped flashing, Daniel took Evelyn by the hand and gently helped her into a sleek black SUV waiting nearby. She sat quietly, still processing everything that had just happened. He wasn't crippled. He wasn't poor. He was Daniel Obasi, the billionaire from the headlines. But to her, he was still the man who smiled softly at breakfast, who helped sweep the floor with his one good hand, and who stayed up listening to her late-night dreams. The car turned off the main road and drove through a long, private driveway. At the end stood a tall mansion with white pillars, glass balconies, and gardens so green they looked painted. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Daniel smiled. "Welcome home." He led her through the grand double doors into the heart of the house that had once felt so empty. Waiting at the bottom of the staircase was Mrs. Obasi, dressed in soft lace and pearls, her face lit with calm joy. Evelyn stepped forward shyly. Before she could speak, Mrs. Obasi reached out and took her hands gently in hers. "I know who you are, my dear," she said warmly. "I was at the supermarket that day, the day you paid for my groceries, without even knowing who I was." Evelyn's eyes widened. That was you?" The older woman nodded, her eyes already glistening. "You didn't just help a stranger. You helped my son. You gave him back something I thought he had lost forever, hope." Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes as Mrs. Obasi continued. "You were the one light in his darkest time." From her pocket, Mrs. Obasi pulled out a small box. She opened it to reveal a stunning diamond bracelet, elegant but understated. "This belonged to my mother," she said, fastening it gently around Evelyn's wrist. "And now, I want it to belong to you. Your kindness fixed what millions couldn't." Evelyn burst into tears, overcome with emotion. By that evening, the internet had exploded with news of Daniel Obasi's engagement, not to a socialite or a celebrity, but to a salesgirl from Surulere. Photos from the supermarket scene surfaced again, this time recaptioned. The beggar was a billionaire and he found real love. She loved him with nothing. Now she has everything. News outlets confirmed that Daniel had never gone bankrupt. In fact, he was wealthier than ever, having quietly launched a global partnership during his time away from the public. But none of that mattered to Evelyn. Not the mansion, not the diamond bracelet, not the trending hashtags. Because the man beside her, the one who used to sit in silence by her window and thank her for small bowls of rice, was still looking at her like she was his entire world. And that was more valuable than anything money could buy. Across town, Sasha was scrolling through her phone when she saw it. Photos, videos, headlines. Daniel Obasi is engaged, not to her, not to anyone in her social circle, But to Evelyn, the same supermarket salesgirl she had mocked, insulted, and publicly humiliated, the image showed Daniel, tall, elegant, very much not crippled, standing beside Evelyn in front of a massive mansion, smiling with pride. The caption burned like acid. She loved him when he was nothing. Now, she has everything. Sasha's phone nearly slipped from her hand. Her heart raced. Her mouth went dry. She staggered backward and sat on the edge of the couch, completely stunned. And as if fate hadn't done enough damage, she remembered what she had come home to say. She was pregnant. The test in her handbag was still wrapped in tissue. She had taken it that morning, convinced the nausea and fatigue meant something else. But when she saw the result, her world spun. She hadn't even told Toba yet. Her fake fairy tale life was falling apart, but she had clung to him like a final piece of driftwood. But now, something was wrong. The apartment was dark when she arrived. The lock felt stiff. Confused, she pushed the door harder, then reached into the mailbox out front. There was a note, folded, messy, written in Toba's handwriting. "Don't bother looking for me. I'm gone. I was never in love with you. You were just convenient and rich. Also, I took everything in the house. You can call the police if you want, but remember, I have the videos in nudes. One wrong move and they'll be everywhere. Don't test me." Sasha's knees gave out. She sank to the floor, trembling, the note fluttering from her hands. She called Janet. No answer. She called 3 more friends. No one picked up. Her eyes were wild, searching, desperate. She was alone. She opened her Instagram app, her pride, her portfolio, her proof that she mattered, and watched as her follower count dropped by the second. Thousands gone. Most of her brand deals had quietly cut ties after the video went viral. The remaining ones now issued public statements condemning her behavior and promising to work with more inclusive voices. Her comment section was filled with people mocking her, reposting the clip of her slapping a man who turned out to be a billionaire. She had nothing left. Not Daniel, not Toba, not Janet, no one, not even her name. She curled up in front of the locked apartment door, arms around her knees, and sobbed until her body shook. Pregnant, alone, and forgotten. A heavy silence wrapped around her as she realized the bitter truth. She had thrown away a crown for crumbs. Meanwhile, the Obasi mansion rooftop was quiet under a sky full of stars. A small dinner table sat between glowing lanterns and gentle wind chimes. It wasn't lavish, just peaceful, personal, just right. Daniel pulled out a chair for Evelyn, who sat with curiosity in her eyes. He took a deep breath. "Evelyn," he began, his voice soft, "there's something I need to tell you." Evelyn looked at him, calm but attentive. "From the very start, this was never about pity or charity. I was testing someone, Sasha, my ex-fiancée." He explained everything, how the staged bankruptcy began, the fake accident, his time in the wheelchair, and the heartbreak that followed. How Sasha's words and actions had crushed the last bit of hope he had in love. "I needed to know if love without money was real," he said. "And then, I met you." Evelyn blinked slowly, then smiled. "I'm glad you found your answer," she said softly. "But I'm even more glad you found yourself in the process." They talked long into the night, about loss, kindness, and how love built on truth is worth more than all the gold in the world. "I never expected anything in return," Evelyn admitted, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I just couldn't stand seeing someone treated unfairly." Daniel reached across the table and held her hand. "You gave me more than anyone ever has." Just as the night was winding down, peace was shattered by the echo of hurried heels on marble floors. Sasha stormed into the Obasi mansion, flanked by 2 security men who tried to stop her, but she pushed past them. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared, her energy desperate. "Daniel!" she yelled from across the hall. "Please, let me explain." Daniel and Evelyn turned to see her. Sasha rushed forward, trembling,
clutching her phone as if it could save her. "I didn't know it was you," she cried. "That day at the supermarket, I thought you were just some street beggar. I was just joking. You know how I play."
Daniel's expression didn't shift. "You weren't joking, Sasha," he said, standing tall. "You were cruel, loud, proud, and you meant every word." She dropped her phone. "But I was with you first. She just appeared out of nowhere. What if she's the gold digger? I've always known you, Daniel. Daniel raised a hand gently, silencing her. "If I were still in that wheelchair, would you be standing here right now?" Sasha swallowed hard, speechless. "You're not here because you're sorry. You're here because your world is falling apart and you think I can fix it." He stepped aside and nodded toward the door. "That chapter is closed." Realizing there was nothing left to say, and no one left to hear her, Sasha turned and left, heels clicking like an empty echo. She didn't look back. The rooftop was quiet again. Evelyn stood beside Daniel as he watched the night sky. "That door needed to close," she whispered. "And a better one opened," Daniel replied, turning to look into her eyes. They held each other's hands. Tomorrow would be their beginning. Few weeks later, the sun poured golden light over the lush garden estate, where rows of fresh white flowers swayed gently in the breeze. The air was filled with soft music and the scent of roses. Guests arrived in elegant attire, the atmosphere alive with excitement and warmth. Today wasn't just another high society wedding. It was a celebration of something deeper, something rare. Daniel Obasi, once thought to be lost in scandal and heartbreak, stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit. But his smile wasn't because of the suit or the crowd. It was because of Evelyn, walking down the aisle in a graceful gown that shimmered like morning dew. Beside her, holding her bouquet and steadying her nerves, was her mother, smiling through tears of pride. The ceremony was simple but majestic. There were no camera crews, no influencers, no elaborate social media stunts. Just two souls who had walked through fire and found peace in each other. When they exchanged vows, even the wind seemed to pause. "I saw the world through cold glass," Daniel whispered, "until you opened the door and let me feel again." Evelyn, her voice shaking, said, "I didn't love you for what you had. I loved you for how you made me feel safe, seen, and whole." Later that evening, during the reception under fairy lights and soft jazz, Mrs. Obasi stood and raised a glass. Her voice carried through the quiet crowd. "He lost everything, to find what mattered most. My son was never truly rich, until he met someone who had nothing, but gave him everything." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. Daniel held her hand tightly. Somewhere across town, in a dimly lit rundown apartment, Sasha scrolled through her cracked phone screen. Her fingers trembled. The wedding was trending everywhere. Videos of Daniel standing tall, smiling, kissing Evelyn's forehead as guests cheered. Articles praising Evelyn's humility. Headlines about Daniel's bold test of love and how it led him to the woman of his dreams. Sasha's stomach twisted. The apartment was silent. No visitors, no calls, no friends. Just echoes of the life she could have had. She dropped the phone on the floor and stared at the peeling paint on the wall. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly empty. Back at the wedding, the night wind swept gently as Daniel and Evelyn stood by a small, quiet garden corner lit with lanterns. Daniel took Evelyn's hand and looked into her eyes. "In losing everything," he said softly, "I found you. And that's how I found myself." She smiled, pressing her forehead against his. Moral of the story. True love is not found in wealth or beauty, but in the way someone holds you when the world turns its back. The worth of a person is not in what they wear or drive, but in how they treat the ones who have nothing to give.